All right, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar. I'm Kyle Barnhart with the GVSU Alumni Relations Office. I'm joined today by Melissa Perino, GVSU's Center for Adult and Continuing Studies, and today's presenter, Dr. David Coffey of the Mathematics Department and the Design Thinking Academy. As we get started here, I'm going to drop in the chat a link to the confirmation email that went out yesterday. In case you didn't receive it or you need to pull up some of the information, there's a link in there to download if you'd like a PDF, a hard copy of the design of the Compass, Innovators Compass for today's presentation. If you are like me and want to be able to physically write as Dr. Coffey is walking through his presentation. So I've dropped that link in the chat, and thank you, Robin, for telling me that I did not drop it to all the attendees. Let's try that again. There we go. Now everyone should see it. And Melissa, I will turn it over to you to introduce Dr. Coffey.
Thanks so much, Kyle. I appreciate it. And again, thank you, attendees. Already you're like going above and beyond and helping us navigate this new normal. This webinar is a little bit different in that past webinars, folks have been able to come in and we've done a little bit of Zoom keeping or housekeeping, saying use your Q&A and ask questions throughout the program. This is different. We're asking you to engage throughout the entire. However, if you don't want to download materials, if you aren't comfortable using a Jamboard, which you'll get a link to shortly as well, then you can still use the chat feature and drop your comments in the chat, or you can sit and listen as well. If you came here today to just listen, that is fine. We do hope you engage. We hope that you drop your comments, your questions along the way, and we'll make sure that those get represented as well. I think you saw we are recording this, and so afterwards you'll also get a recording of it. We're also hoping that there'll be some interest in perhaps even a follow-up session as well to sort of unpack a little bit more of the things that Dr. Coffey is going to share with us today. So we are glad that you are here, and we are especially glad to have with us today Dr. David Coffey. David came to Grand Valley as a mathematics with a Ph.D. in mathematics and as a mathematics faculty member, and then has expanded that role to being the director of the Design Thinking Academy. And I knew just a wee bit about design thinking and always thought it's more about that creative piece of things. And I thought, wow, what a wild brain to have this mathematical and piece as well as this creative. And so we are thrilled to have you share your experiences and expertise with us. A little bit about that connection between, besides the PhD in math, David has done design thinking institute work at Stanford and at the Henry Ford Learning Institute, and is also really an avid outdoorsman. When he says he likes to hike or likes to camp, it's not just going to our local state park, which to me is a feat in itself. He and his spouse have done long distance hikes across Scotland and England. So David is with us for the long haul, pardon the really bad pun there, but we are thrilled that you are with us today. And again, we hope that you are willing, attendees, that you are willing to engage through chat or directly through some of the Jamboard links. David, thank you and welcome. We will turn it right over to you.
Thanks, Melissa. Thanks, Kyle. Appreciate this opportunity. Excited to share part of keeping up the metaphor, part of the journey. This just as a reminder that we're talking about design thinking, finding our way through uncertain times. There's a description. It is intended, this seminar is intended to be interactive, and so I'll ask you a couple of times to participate in some different ways. As Melissa said, if you want to just sit and let it wash over you at this point, that's fine as well. You can always come back to this. At the bottom of this page, you can see that there's a poll. I think Kyle's gonna put that poll up. Yep, there you go. So if you take a moment and respond to that poll, and we can get that. One of the things that I want us to be aware of is that, and I apologize, I'm going to keep looking off to the right here for my tablet. is that there is this model of design thinking. This comes out of the D School, although this version that's annotated is from Illinois, that has this model that includes empathy, define, ideate, prototype, and test. You can get an entire degree in design, and we don't have time for that here. And so I'm not going to spend a lot of time with this model. I'm going to introduce you to a new tool that you can use on a fairly regular basis to help you navigate through uncertain times. Perfect. Appreciate your participation in that poll. So what is design thinking? I was introduced to this idea of the answer to this question by John Barry. He was the first director of the Design Thinking Academy here at Grand Valley, and was also a part of the Design Thinking Initiative that started under our previous provost, Gail Davis. And the way he explained it to me is that design thinking is an intentional, collaborative process. The collaborative part suggests that there's a sense of creativity building on each other's ideas. It's a way to find our way forward through challenges, finding innovative and new solutions. The three petals are here because it represents this idea of creativity. If you did get a chance to watch the George Land TED Talk before this seminar, you heard him talk about this idea of creativity and how we lose our creativity as we get older. So he created he and his group created a test for NASA about creativity. And what they found was that 98% of 5-year-olds see themselves as and demonstrate that they are creative. And that as we get older, we lose that for a variety of different reasons. Part of it is biological. Our dorsolateral prefrontal cortex starts to develop and helps us to make better decisions. The other part, though, is that society, we're educated to be more critical. And he uses this metaphor of pedals in a car to represent the problem. Because as we're taught to be more critical, he calls that convergent thinking, we do both the convergent and divergent thinking at the same time. So we tend to hit both the brake and the gas at the same time. And if you've ever done that, I wouldn't recommend it, but if you have ever done that, the brake wins, right? Thankfully. And so, so he talks about the need to be able to make sure when are we hitting the brake and when are we hitting the gas, because that's going to help us with our creativity. We need to know that there are times to be divergent, to explore a multitude of ideas, and there are times to be convergent, to focus in. And again, design thinking gives us a mechanism for being able to monitor our thinking, to be metacognitive, to know which we're doing. I've added the clutch because I also want to really focus in on that idea of being metacognitive and being intentional about the work that we're doing. And so we want to know what we're thinking and know when we're hitting the brake and when we're hitting the gas. And so one of the tools that is useful to do that is called Innovators Compass. Innovators Compass was developed by a designer named Ella Ben-Ur. She has worked for IDEO, one of the big design firms, international design firms. She has graduated from MIT with an engineering degree and now teaches at Olin College in Massachusetts, where she teaches design thinking and then also teaches it around the world. We were fortunate enough to the Academy to bring her in and do 3 presentations a few years ago. That's where I was introduced to the Compass. And I liked it as a compact, concrete approach to design. And so rather than me telling you a lot about it, this is your first opportunity to engage with the conversation and with the Jamboard. Over on the left-hand side, you'll see that there's a sticky note thing. You can add a sticky note, and something you notice might be the colors, that each of this different size have different colors. And so you can add your notices on one side, and then I might, taking that, I wonder if, do the colors matter? And those are my wonders on the other side. So I want to give you a chance here to take a couple of minutes to do some notice and wonder around the Innovators Compass. Again, if you're not able to do it on the Jamboard, you can also put your notices and wonders in the chat. Yeah, people come first. People are at the center. So if you know anything about design thinking, it's often also referred to as human-centered design. And so that noticing is important, that they're in the center. What else do you notice? What else do you wonder? Yeah, that's a great observation. We sometimes do skip principles and we jump right to, actually, we might skip ideas. And so it's important to recognize that part of what we want to do is attend to all aspects of the compass. It's easy to skip something, and that again is the power of design thinking. How does one start? The numbers represent an ideal starting. And so we would start by thinking about the people, who's involved, again, that human-centered part. But if you were like thinking, I have a great idea for starting a business, you might actually start with experiments and talk about the details and then bring those to the people involved. Yeah, we need to experiment. That's great. One of the design thinking mindsets is a bias towards experimentation, trying new ideas. What else? Yeah, the 4 points. So you're noticing there are these axes, and these axes help give us some perspective when we're in different parts. So if I'm in principles, I want to think about big pictures in past and present. So I use this actually with my students in one of my math classes, and I said, so what matters most for your success in math? And they'll say something like taking notes, right? Well, taking notes is a detail. And so being able to instead say, why is taking notes important? Well, because then I'm engaged. That's what matters most to you then, is engagement. That's a big picture. It's something that you've noticed from your past and present. When we're in experiments, now we're thinking about the details in the future. We want to get specific about things we're going to do in the future. Yeah, guesses are fine. How do you transition into it? Some of it is just being intentional, right? That you're really thinking about, I'm going to attend to all aspects of this as I'm trying to solve my challenge, right? I'm not just going to jump into something to try. I'm going to make sure that I'm considering the people involved. I'm going to make sure that I'm thinking about what matters most, and then what ways are there. I was telling Kyle and Melissa that, and maybe it makes sense with my math background, that I tend to live down here in details, right? I tend to be observant, hopefully, and I tend to think about those experiments. My wife tends to live up here in big ideas. We make a good team as long as we recognize where we're doing that work. And so that transition requires me to be not just moving from observations to experiments, but also paying attention to these other things. Yeah, so hopefully that makes the point of, yes, we do want to attend to each phase. It's important that somehow, and again, we may do it in a variety of different ways, but that we attend to each phase. Again, experiments don't have to be last. That's just ideal. You might start with experiments. You might have something that you want to try and start there. You just want to make sure that you attend to all of those pieces. Excuse me. Yeah, it is hard for some people to experiment and try new things. We find ourselves in ruts. So one of the things that Ella talks about is this is intended to help us to get unstuck. It's intended to help us to explore new ideas and new opportunities. Is there a measure of success? Yes, that actually comes before you are going to decide what successful looks like. Perfect. So thanks for engaging in that. I'll give you a chance to do that again in a little bit. I want you, though, to recognize again that these aspects of the compass, so this is just another version. If you go to Ella's website, everything's free at innovatorscompass.org. Everything is free there, and you can download a variety of different versions of the compass. But I want you to notice that, again, the entire compass represents that clutch, that the metaphor of when do I shift up and when do I shift down? When do I go fast and when do I go slow? So observations and ideas are meant to be places where you're turning off that judgmental part of your brain and really trying to diverge, to flare. Henry Ford Learning Institute calls those the opportunities to flare. In principles and experiments, those are places to narrow, to focus, to converge, right? Because we want, one of the things that Ella did with the colors and the shapes was also to be, she's a designer, so everything has a purpose. And so this star yellow, she wanted you to think about that as being a North Star, something that we can follow. Again, some people here, if they're not paying attention, they come up with lots and lots of principles. I work with teachers and we tend to overthink about everything that we want to accomplish in a lesson. And so this gives us a chance to focus in on what matters most. You can have those other things in mind, but what really matters in the work that we're doing? And that becomes our North Star. And the same thing with experiments. We want to be really honed in on what we want to try here. And so all of this is a reminder of, if I'm here and here, I'm hitting the gas. If I'm here and here, I'm hitting the brake. Okay. So again, if as we're going on, if you have questions, don't hesitate to put them in the chat. And obviously, hopefully at this point, I'm not working off a script. And so I'm happy if there's a confusion or a question to interact with you in that way. So I promised you that if you are so inclined, that we are going to spend now the rest of the time thinking about some personal or professional challenge you'd like to address during the coming year. So again, take some time, use a sticky note, add some challenge that you'd like to address during this year. You can always, again, put something in the chat and Kyle and Melissa can add it for you. But this is also a chance for us to brainstorm some different ideas. So let's give you some time to think about a professional or personal challenge you'd like to address, that you'd like to think about applying the compass to. Efficiencies. Nice. What else? What are some other challenges? Increasing collaboration, thinking about teams. prioritizing urgent versus current. Time management, teaching design thinking to veterans. Identifying next steps, where you're going, nice. So you can get to, so if you're on the Jamboard and you're stuck on a page, at the very top, there are a couple arrows, and those will move you from frame to frame. So again, if we were thinking about principles, I'll give you a little, transparency. One of my principles here might have been giving you an opportunity to practice using Jamboard, right? And that's certainly, I'm hoping that you're finding that as a possibility, but that's not my main focus. My main focus is that I'm hoping that you get a sense of how to be really intentional about, like I said, thinking about when am I coming up with lots and lots of ideas and lots of information, and when do I need to focus in. Okay. So you can continue to add those there. This Jamboard, now that if you've joined it, you'll have access to it. It'll be in your shared Google folder, and you can always come back to it. You're welcome. And but let me give you a feel now for what is this going to look like. So we're now going to go through some guided imagery. And in that guided imagery, I'm going to ask you to go through all 5 aspects of the compass and consider answering these questions, right? Or addressing the original questions about who's involved, what's happening, what matters most, what are some things, what are some ways, and what's something to try. And so I'm going to ask you, we're going to use something called speculative design. This is a little bit both design thinking and science fiction. And it gives you a chance to work on thinking about success in the future. And so this is what it's going to look like. You can do that on a sheet of paper. I mean, all you need to do is draw an X. Oh, you can't see that with my background, sorry. You can just draw an X on a sheet of paper, put yourself in the middle, and just label observations and principles and ideas and experiments. You can print out the one that you were given. You can use the Jamboard. Yep, and you'll actually have a link here if you want to your own personal Jamboard. It'll ask if you want to make a copy, you'll say yes. And so if you wanted to use a Jamboard to do this, you could. So I'm going to give you, again, it's a tiny url.com/DT Lakers 12121. Give you a chance if you want to do that. And then get comfortable with some guided imagery here. We're going to think about ourselves going into the future. We're now actually December 31st, 2021. And the challenge that you've selected, you've been successful at. You've had a great year. I want you to imagine that. It's New Year's Eve. You're looking back, reflecting on the year. It's been successful. As you're looking back, you're noticing that you didn't accomplish that success alone. Who were the other people that were involved that helped supported your success? Add their names to the middle of your compass. As you're looking around, as you're thinking about your success in this time to reflect, What's happening? What are you saying? What were you doing? How do you know that you were being successful? Those go under observations. You're free to add to the one that we're using, but you can also do it on your own. Yeah, how are you feeling? What are you saying? What are you doing that represents that success? Now, all success comes up short in some ways as well. So observations, you can see two frames. We want to frame it as both what worked and what needs work. So what are some things that are still missing? Those also go under observations. They're meant to be orange. They're meant to be the clay that we work with, the foundation, the ground. So what else do we want to consider when we're thinking about what didn't work, what needs work in our observations? Again, you're hitting the gas in this, so you want to put as much information as you're thinking about success as you can in this spot. And then, as we wrap up our trip to the future, we'll only be able to remember this for a little bit afterwards. And so we want to really think about what matters most. So take a minute and reflect on what matters most in terms of having a successful challenge, and put that in the upper left-hand corner. And again, that will be our shining star. What matters most from your success? And then in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Happy New Year, but we are back from the future. We're back to where we are now. And hopefully, having done this, you've worked on the left-hand side of the compass. Okay, you've thought about what matters most, and you've thought about what's happening. You now want to take that and move to ideas. Not too detailed, but as you're thinking about the observations, how might you have gotten to that spot? How might you have gotten to that place of success? What are some things you might have tried? You want to try to come up with 6 ideas and put that into the upper left-hand corner, upper right-hand corner. So on your own compass, add some ideas. If you're thinking about collaboration, it might be that you had a presentation on it, or it might be that you tried a new app, or it might be that you develop some norms for collaboration. Those would be just a couple of ideas for that. If your challenge was weight loss, it might be that you were going to join a gym. It might be that you were going to find an accountability partner. It might be that you were going to start cooking your own food and going out less, which this time right now, right, might be easier. Come up with some ideas. Yeah, so you want to generate as many at this phase and not just specific one, right? So we tend to sometimes want to jump into one idea. But here we want to have as many ideas as possible. So a way of tracking progress is an idea. That's great. It doesn't have a lot of detail to it. So this is a good example of an idea. Thanks, Melissa. Sometimes it helps to expand and have wild ideas. So imagine that money isn't an object. What would be some ideas that you could do if money wasn't an object? I might pay to bring in The Rock to be a inspirational speaker. I might fly everyone on a private jet to Hawaii. What if money wasn't an object? That might help you to get to 6 ideas. And one of my collaborators loves to use the one, something that involves a cat. So somehow it involves a cat. What would an idea be that would, for your purposes, whether it's efficiency or collaboration or weight loss, something that involves a cat? And it could be any kind of cat, right? I'm going to get a lion to chase me as I run. This is better when you can build on and work with others. Radical collaboration is an important aspect of design thinking. And so when you can work with others, and Melissa talked a little bit about the idea that we might be able to gather again in a even less formal setting where we can work that out. So once you have your 6 ideas, again, hit the gas. We got lots of information. We're now going to hit the brake. Take one idea or take a set of ideas, bring them together, and start thinking about designing an experiment. Again, it should look a little bit like this. So your ideas have somehow gotten to the point where you can choose them from the perspective that they're going to be powerful, that they're going to be practical. There's something that you can actually do. Pick those, maybe combine, like I said here, I might combine 4 and 1, and then start thinking about details. So when am I going to do it? How am I going to do it? Where am I going to do it? Who else is going to be involved? And what is it going to look like? We need details now. It's hard to actually put this into practice if we don't have those details. I can say I want to lose weight. I can say I'm going to go to the gym, but I need details in order to make that work. So take a couple of minutes now and think about what's your experiment that you want to try in the next week. I'm going to be very specific. So as you're thinking about the next week, where can you start in terms of addressing your challenge and becoming successful? Great. So make space for change. Now, if that were to be your experiment, now what are the details for that? What is that going to look like? How much time is going to take to make space for change? How are you going to make space for change? Who's going to be involved in it? So being as specific as possible, because we're in that detail part. The more details, the better. So good, yeah. So they're free. Again, Ella actually put, Jennifer, that is a good question. Ella originally in her original compass did not have any numbers on it. She was actually asked by people like me, where do you start and how do you progress through it? So she reluctantly put numbers on it. But if your group, Jennifer, so the question is, I'm thinking of it, my team, and they are very detail oriented. Suggestions if they want to get deep into the details early on. They're free to do that, right? So you might start by either working in observations or working in experiments, Jennifer. There's nothing wrong with that. Talking about what's worked in the past or what needs work in the past or what ideas they have for the future. Not a problem if they start there. You just then want to make sure that you say back up and let's think about the people involved. Let's get their opinion about what's working or what's not. There's where you can get into observations. What exactly is our plan? So I was telling earlier, Melissa and Kyle, about my wife and I wanted to buy a travel trailer, right? So we actually started out with an experiment. We knew what we wanted, right? But we weren't quite sure what we wanted on it. It was hard to get into the specific details without, getting into a fight. I was kidding that, the compass saved our marriage. It really didn't, but it gave us a way to address some of the conflicting stuff. So we got into the details, but our details weren't the same. She wanted a bathroom in it. I didn't necessarily want a bathroom in it. And so that's where then we had to use the rest of the compass to try to make sense of it. So yeah, so you can start anywhere. I have this hypothesis that different people and different organizations live in different parts of the compass. Like I said, I believe I live down here for the most part. Our youngest son lives over here. He's always thinking about the future. We're trying to get him to think more about the past and present in terms of principles and observations. So I think it's good that you recognize where you or your organization is, and then it's just a matter of expansion. Okay. So your details. Get into the details. Journal daily. Look at that. Journal is what you're going to do daily, and honestly is how you're going to do it and when you're going to do it. Forgive myself for failure and write a lot. Write it out. Those are very specific. This is a great one right here. The one thing, as you go on and I would encourage that as we're thinking about using the compass or any design thinking, I didn't say it before because it really doesn't matter in the work that we're doing, but it can be helpful if you put one idea or one thought per sticky note, because that'll allow you to move them around later to test those things out. But for now, this is thank you, whoever put this down. This is a really wonderful example of some details and something that you could do tomorrow, right? You could do it today. Very good. The compass is, so I'm reading from the chat. The compass is circular. I feel like it's helpful to consider that there's no beginning or end, and it's helpful to go through the compass multiple times and iterate the process to move forward. Exactly. And keeping people at the center. So again, if you look at the very first model that I showed you that comes from the D school, we talk about it as being human-centered, but that empathy piece can be lost as there's plenty of examples of people who design for and not with. So there's a big difference there. So as I'm designing for, I can tend to put my own ideas or put my own thoughts or my own biases on what I think somebody needs. But by keeping the people at the center and asking that, that's very helpful. Yeah, so again, the compass was really helpful for us with my wife and I, because we ended up being able to get to a shared principle as we looked at our observations. How were we thinking about using our camper? How had we used it in the past? One of the shared principles that we could come up with, we listed a bunch of them, but the shared principle that we could come up with was keeping it simple. So how might we keep it simple? And so that then informed the details that we put in. a bathroom in our RV was not going to keep it simple. It was not going to give us the space that we wanted, those sorts of things. And so then it became really easy because we had a shared principle. That was what was really important for us, that we hadn't done because we'd spent all of our time down here. Does that help, Ken? All right. So I did this at South by Southwest EDU with Ella now 2 years ago. And it was really interesting. Again, the experiment can simply be all on paper. I talked with somebody who wanted to start a new school, and she was trying to consider whether she wanted to build a new building or purchase an old one. And it can, again, this is where design thinking, it can be really helpful because it can be cheap, right? Don't actually buy the building and test it out. Don't actually rent the building and test it out. Come up with a plan and then share the plan with the people who are involved and get feedback from those people about what works and what doesn't work with the plan. When we talk about details, this is also called prototyping sometimes. It's okay that your example, if you're going to share it with somebody else, it's okay if your experiment, if your prototype is an incomplete rendering of what you want to try to do, because that can offer blank space, opportunities for others' voice and choice, especially if the people, there's more than just you involved, right? If you're going to design with, not for. And so it's okay that you want details, but it's okay if you don't have all the details, so that you can invite other people in to give your observations. And so one of the ways to do that is to use this feedback framework capture grid that, again, Henry Ford Learning Institute shared with me. And it's basically just 4 things. You'd give somebody your experiment, and they'd look at it and say, oh, this is a real positive. I'd want something like this if I were going to be doing this. If I were trying to lose weight, that's what I would try to do. They might notice something that's missing or something they would change, and they would say, I wish that this also included, or I wish you'd tweak this. And that this is where the math guy in me loves this, because that's not a triangle, that's a delta. And delta means different. What would you change? What ideas would they have, right? Universal symbol for ideas is a light bulb. And then that gives them a chance to say, I would. How would they do what they were doing? So I would. And then any questions they still have about your experiment or prototype, they can do I wonder. So this, again, being transparent, this was a prototype. I've never done something like this in this format before. And so I would appreciate your feedback here. So this is a good chance for you to practice using this grid. As you're thinking about this presentation, what's something you want to take away from it? What's something that if I'm doing it again, I should do it. I want you to do this again. What's something you wish was different? It's a prototype. I'm not trying to sell this particular version. I'm sure it will be better. I apologize to you now. This will be better as a result of your feedback. What ideas has this given you? And what questions do you still have? So I'll give you that opportunity, and then I know that Melissa and Kyle might also have some Q&A questions that they want to ask. So feel free to populate this frame. This is frame 8. Again, use some sticky notes and put your I wants, I wish, I wonder around. Let me make it very clear what this is for. This webinar. Yeah, and you can put them in the chat as well. Yeah, so a script, when I first started it, I wrote out a script that had those things. And I think that some of the other thing that if you're interested, I can put you in contact and connect you with where I heard about speculative design. But I think it's possible for you to kind of write up your own script. Yeah, I wish this could be an in-person presentation as well. It would be nice because and again, if you look at Ella's website, you can see what this might look like if it's in person. We have some video from her here on campus doing something similar. So I really do want to give her a shout out. A lot of what I've learned about both design thinking and about implementing the compass, obviously, I've learned from her, and you'd see that if you saw her video. Yeah, and so that I want to be able to think about that. Hopefully, maybe that might be a follow-up. Okay, a follow-up either through the alumni office or through the Design Thinking Academy, or even just connecting with others on this call, on this webinar. Yeah, it's a nice framework, isn't it? I love the framework that both offers us support but gives enough freedom to explore, which is, again, why I like design thinking in general and the compass in particular. I'd be happy to present at your college, especially virtually. That's not a problem nowadays, right? And yet I would also say that I'm convinced most of you now, having gone through this just once, could at least create your own experiment where you'd share it with your colleagues, where you'd share it with your students, where you'd share it with your families, whatever the case may be. Melissa, what questions might you have?
Thanks, David. I know one of the questions that we had seen in advance was you've talked a lot about helping us apply it professionally and personally.
Yeah.
I loved the camper idea, and I love the fact that it saved your marriage. I also love the fact that I know not to come to you for health advice because you're going to get a lion to chase you if you want to get healthier. So
that's just an idea. That's a wild idea.
I loved it. It was great. It really was, in helping us sort of have this more expansive thing, which sometimes, especially now, it gets a little more challenging, right? We tend to get stuck in this like really small space. And I think this helps us sort of take those constraints off, think a little bit bigger and broader, and lions chasing us to get healthier is one great example. But you've also talked a little bit. Do you know any organizations in West Michigan that are currently using design thinking or the Innovators Compass to sort of help with some of the problem solving?
So, so one that I know in particular that's using Innovators Compass because their director attended our Ella's presentation is Pause with a Cause. So they've been using that as a nonprofit to think about different pieces of it. Innovators Compass, again, is more of a in the moment, small, sort of short, hour, half hour sort of interaction. There are a lot of organizations in the area that are using design thinking in a broader sense. Steelcase, obviously, right? I mean, Steelcase works hand in hand with IDEO. Hayworth is another one. All of obviously the furniture design companies use some version of design thinking. The museum school in Grand Rapids has both the middle school and the high school are dedicated to using design thinking. In the Ottawa ISD is Jason Posada, who's there, is using a lot of it with teachers. And so you see it a lot in schools. Hamilton, David Tebow, the superintendent at Hamilton, is using it a lot. Because of my own experience connected with education, I'm familiar with those a lot. Spectrum has been doing some work with design thinking. Who else? WMCAT, West Michigan Center for Arts and Technology, has a lot that they do with WMCAT, or excuse me, with design thinking. Who's the other one that came to mind? Oh, now I lost it. Go to your next question. I'll come back.
All righty. That sounds great.
United Way, that was it. See, as soon as you started, United Way of Grand Rapids is doing a lot with. But again, they're doing the more of a long-term version of that. The Johnson Center is really focused and interested on it. The Compass itself, given the constraints of this, I felt like that was a better way to focus than on what ends up being a more ambiguous long-term approach with a typical design. But we have a lot, especially in West Michigan. If you broaden it out, Ford is using a lot of design thinking, again, connected with IDEO.
That makes great sense.
Yeah.
And you know, in all honesty, you mentioned it a couple of times here. We knew that 1 hour together today in a webinar format isn't necessarily ideal, but it's what we can do. We do what we can with what we have where we're at, right? And so while you've given attendees an opportunity to start to think about how this might apply either to a personal or professional challenge that they want to address for this year, you know, we talked a little bit generally about a follow-up session for this, where if attendees, we would give you an opportunity, if you have already attended and started to do some work on this and wanted to share and bounce ideas with others and sort of get back to that other quadrant as well. So we will send you some more information about that in a follow-up link with the recording to this, and see if you would like to get back together to take a little bit of a deeper dive. Again, just a 1 hour format, again, virtual, because that's how we all still are. Yes, we'd all love to be together in a room, either in Allendale or Grand Rapids, but we are here. And David, you've really got some of those wheels thinking. I see that Kyle has also dropped in the feedback that David asked you to post on the Jamboard is fantastic, and we will definitely, David will use that as he thinks about future webinars and virtual connections. We'll use that as we think about additional ways to continue to provide access to lifelong learning to our alumni and to our friends in the community. And yet Kyle's dropped a link in the chat to all of the attendees. It starts out with the GVSU and it says Qualtrics in there. If you would also kindly click on that link and give us additional feedback that we can go back and review as well about, you know, what other topics would you like to see presented, and we will be in touch with you. We have all of your email addresses. We are thrilled that you were able to take some time out today and join us in this. David, I am telling you, I know where to run again when I'm being chased by a lion, right to your door. But thank you so very much. Now, I don't see any additional questions dropped into the chat, but I do see we had about 50 folks attending today at some point. I see a question there about how many attendees were there. So, but what we've also found, to be completely honest with all of you, is that with many of the webinars, we'll get about 150 RSVPs and then only see about half of those actually show up. Webinars were brand new before. Now folks are knowing, well, I don't need to be there to be engaged in conversation if I can get the recording later. So I see David is dropping some other resources in there as well. We'll send additional links to you afterwards. So Kyle, this was exciting because it's January. It's a new way of thinking, and it's a new year, and hopefully a new year of many opportunities and new ways to tackle challenges. David, our thanks to you. Kyle, do you have anything else that you would like to wrap up with?
Just a thank you again. Echo your thanks, Melissa, to David and to all the attendees. I do want to throw in a quick plug. Next month, February, we will have a webinar titled The Power of Education. It's going to be a really interesting conversation with Dr. Craig Benjamin, Dr. William Washington, and Dr. Moyer Ozias from Grand Valley, talking about the role of education, the challenges of first-gen students. It's loosely connected to the book Educated, which is a part of our first Read with Lakers reading Alumni Reading Group, or Grand Valley Community Reading Group, I suppose. So definitely check that out. And then in March, watch for, we'll have a webinar in partnership with the Career Center looking at understanding the job offer, how to negotiate your salary and benefits and all of that kind of stuff. So always more good stuff coming, and definitely hoped to be together in person in the future. And maybe David, we can have you back at some point in the future to do an in-person event with us. So thank you, everyone, and watch for that follow-up email in the next few days.
Thank you very much.